The train journey begins. Compartment chaos and the oversized replica. The transition from the triumphant telephone call to the practical realities of travel is handled with the effortless grace that distinguishes the best of the Lucy show. One moment, Lucy Carmichael is gazing at the telephone as a sacred relic. The next, she and Vivian Bagley are shepherding a group of excited Cub Scouts and an extremely large, extremely fragile sugar cube, White House, through a busy train station and onto the cars that will carry them to Washington. The shift is seamless because the writers understand that Lucy's victories are never complete until they have been tested by the physical world, and the physical world in this instance takes the form of a narrow compartment door and a set of railroad regulations that were never designed to accommodate presidential gifts made of sugar. The boys' excitement is immediate and infectious. Sherman's question, "Sherman, do we really get to sleep on the train?" and the affirmative reply that dinner and breakfast are included as well, establish the journey as an adventure in its own right. One of the scouts declares with the solemnity of a child discovering a new truth, "I must say being a Cub Scout is sure enriching my life." The line is both funny and oddly moving. It reminds the audience that the Sugar Cube project, for all its eventual complications, has already succeeded in its primary educational purpose. It has expanded the boys' sense of possibility. They are not merely traveling to Washington. They are traveling as participants in a civic ceremony of their own making. The first notes of impending physical comedy are sounded as the group attempts to maneuver the model through the train. "Be careful, Phil. Don't drop it," Lucy warns, and the reply, "I haven't dropped it yet, and you backed me through 6 Pullman cars," already hints at the awkwardness of transporting an object that was never meant to travel. The model has been constructed in a living room. It has the proportions of a living room project. The train, by contrast, is a world of narrow corridors, low doorways and compartments designed for human passengers and modest luggage. The collision between these two scales is inevitable, and the writers waste no time in staging it. When the group reaches their compartment, the crisis announces itself with classic clarity. "It won't go through the door," someone observes, and Lucy's immediate response is pure denial. "Oh, of course it will. Push the door open." The insistence is characteristic. Lucy has secured a presidential appointment. She has invested time, money, and emotional energy in the journey. She will not allow a mere door to stand between the Sugar Cube White House and its destiny. Yet the door, indifferent to presidential appointments, remains stubbornly narrow. Attempts to raise the model, to turn it on its side, to angle it through the opening all fail. "It'll break off the portico," Vivian warns, and the specific architectural detail is perfect. The portico is not merely a decorative element. It is the visual signature of the White House, the feature that makes the replica recognizable. Its loss would reduce the gift to an anonymous pile of sugar cubes. The comedy escalates as the practical consequences of the problem become clear. The women have spent extra money on a compartment precisely so that the model would have a safe place to rest. Now that safe place is inaccessible. The conductor's arrival provides the necessary voice of institutional authority. Lucy's appeal is a masterpiece of polite desperation. "We are unable to get this into our compartment, so could you please tell me where to store it?" The conductor's reply is firm and final. There is no room. The baggage car requires advance notice of 30 minutes. Leaving the model in the aisle is against regulations. Every possible alternative is closed. The regulations, he explains with the weary patience of a man who has heard every possible excuse, cover every little nook and cranny. Lucy's response to this bureaucratic wall is one of the sequence's most revealing character moments. "Vivian," she declares, "people who have an appointment with the president do not have to worry about the petty problems of minor officials." The line is both comic and slightly dangerous. It reveals the extent to which the presidential appointment has already begun to reshape Lucy's sense of her own importance. She is no longer merely a den mother with a homemade gift. She is a woman on official business, and official business, in her mind, supersedes ordinary rules. The attitude is classic Lucy. She does not set out to break rules for the pleasure of breaking them, but once a higher purpose has been established, lesser obstacles become invisible. The decision to place the model in the aisle anyway is therefore both inevitable and fraught with comic potential. The women carefully position the replica where it will be least in the way, and the train begins to move. We're going. "Well, Washington, here we come," Lucy announces, and the declaration carries a note of hard-won triumph. The model is on the train. The appointment is secured. The boys are excited. For a brief moment, all is well. That moment does not last. The subsequent dinner scene provides a brief interlude of domestic normalcy. "Oh, wasn't that a delicious dinner?" I love to eat on trains before the disaster strikes. The model left unattended in the aisle has been destroyed. The exact cause is left slightly ambiguous in the transcript, but the effect is absolute. What happened to it? That's what happened to it, Lucy says, and the simple repetition conveys the full weight of the catastrophe. Weeks of work. The boy's pride, the presidential appointment, the entire elaborate structure of the adventure, all of it has been reduced to a scattering of broken sugar cubes and crushed architectural details. The emotional reaction is immediate and layered. Lucy's first concern is practical and maternal. What are we going to tell the boys? What are we going to tell the president? The questions reveal the dual nature of her investment. She cares about the children's disappointment, and she cares about the social embarrassment of arriving empty-handed at a presidential appointment she herself arranged. Vivian's suggestion that the president might accept a replica of Admiral Byrd's headquarters at the South Pole is a perfect example of her dry, supportive humor. It acknowledges the impossibility of the situation while refusing to abandon hope entirely. The decision that follows is pure Lucy Carmichael in crisis mode. There is only one possible course of action: the White House must be rebuilt before 8 o'clock the next morning. The practical obstacle is immediately identified. They will need 3,000 sugar cubes. The number is staggering, and Vivian's response is the voice of reason. The dining car is unlikely to maintain a surplus of 3,000 sugar cubes for the convenience of desperate den mothers. Yet Lucy is already moving. She will speak to the dining car steward. Vivian will prepare to leave the train at the next stop and buy whatever sugar she can find. The plan is desperate, logistically improbable, and entirely consistent with the character's refusal to accept defeat. The sequence as a whole is a masterclass in the construction of physical comedy from ordinary materials. The Sugar Cube White House is not an intrinsically comic object. It becomes comic because of the discrepancy between its delicate nature and the rough environment of the train, between the grandeur of its intended purpose and the practical difficulties of transporting it, between Lucy's absolute determination and the indifferent realities of railroad regulations and human carelessness. Lucille Ball's genius lay in her ability to inhabit that discrepancy completely. One can imagine the succession of physical choices, the careful angling of the model, the increasingly frantic attempts to force it through the door, the stricken expression when the destruction is discovered, that would have turned the written scene into a classic piece of visual comedy. The supporting characters in this sequence are drawn with the economical precision that marks the series at its best. The conductor is not a villain. He is a man doing his job, bound by regulations that exist for good reasons. His refusal to make exceptions is frustrating to Lucy, but it is not malicious. The dining car steward, who will appear in the next phase of the adventure, is similarly grounded in the practical realities of his work. The comedy arises not from the cruelty of institutions, but from the collision between those institutions and Lucy's boundless sense of possibility. In the broader context of The Lucy Show, the train sequence serves as a perfect illustration of the series' central comic mechanism. Lucy's schemes almost always begin with a reasonable or even admirable impulse, in this case the desire to give the Cub Scouts a meaningful encounter with their government. The impulse is then expanded beyond practical limits. The expansion generates logistical and physical complications. The complications produce chaos, and out of the chaos, through a combination of determination, improvisation, and sheer refusal to quit, some form of resolution is eventually achieved. The train sequence is the middle movement of that classic structure, the point at which the initial triumph has been thoroughly dismantled and the hard work of reconstruction must begin. The cultural texture of the early 1960s is present throughout. The Pullman cars, the dining service, the timetable, the very idea of an overnight train journey from New York to Washington. All of these details evoke a world in which long-distance travel still retained a degree of ceremony, adventure. The Cub Scouts' excitement about sleeping on the train and eating multiple desserts is the excitement of children for whom such a journey is still a special event. Lucy and Vivian's decision to spend extra money on a compartment so that the model would have a proper place is a small but telling detail of middle-class aspiration. They are not wealthy, but they are willing to invest in the dignity of the occasion. By the end of the sequence, the Sugar Cube White House has been destroyed, the presidential appointment is still in force, and Lucy has committed herself to an all-night effort of reconstruction that will require resources she does not yet possess. The stage is set for the next phase of the adventure, the quest for 3,000 sugar cubes, a quest that will involve a dining car steward with political opinions, a horse named Annabelle, and a cross-country ride of remarkable physical comedy. The compartment door that would not open for the model has opened instead onto a new and even more chaotic chapter of Lucy Carmichael's determination to keep a promise to a group of Cub Scouts, and by extension, to the President of the United States. The sequence ends as so many of the best Lucy sequences do, with the quiet recognition that the real adventure is only beginning. The train is moving. Washington is drawing closer. The model is in ruins. And Lucy Carmichael, undaunted, is already planning the next impossible step.